Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good day. Welcome. I'm assuming it's an international gathering since we're on Zoom. And this is an interesting combination of a 12-step meeting, of course, because that's who I am and many of you are. But it's also going to include the subject focus, actually, on forgiveness. We plan on being with you for a couple hours formally. And if there are questions and comments at the conclusion of the 2 hours, I will stay. Fred probably won't. I will stay on the Zoom until we've satisfied the conversations, questions, and comments. So this is the cover to my book. Everybody probably knows that at this point. 12 Steps to Spiritual Awakening. Yes, it's about the 12 steps. 12 chapters, can you imagine? One for each step. The knowledge, the understanding, and the experience as to how to navigate those steps. But that's not the point today. The point is one of the fruits of that navigation, one of the results of that navigation. And I had no idea what forgiveness was. I had no idea that I had begun the process of forgiveness. In fact, I concluded the steps without any idea of the word and or the experience of forgiveness in any type of conscious sense. But once I began studying forgiveness, I realized I had been brought through the process to freedom. I received freedom from addiction, a grace, on February 21st, 1984. Not because I asked for it and not because I worked for it. I was willing to stop drinking to support my wife's recovery. I haven't had a drink or an inclination to drink since February 21st, 1984. I didn't go to AA for another 3 months. I didn't work the steps for 5 years. This isn't going to be about me and my autobiography. Some of you already know parts of that. It's not relevant, though. Well, what I'm saying is all of this is a process, and it doesn't need to be done consciously, and it doesn't need to certainly be done perfectly. With the intention of doing the best you can to be the best you can. That's it. I don't think I've ever said it that way before. To do the best you can to be the best you can, a willingness to do that. It's as simple as it gets. And that's been, I didn't know it, but that's been sort of the centerpiece of my journey since I was probably 17 years old. To do the best I can, to be the best I can. I had no idea what it meant, and I certainly didn't have any idea that that was it. And it took a long time for me to begin to be conscious of it, the journey and the destination, as well as to be conscious that I have been delivered to it periodically, incrementally, and progressively. Enough of that. So today I want to talk about, it's a brand new title for me, the freedom of forgiveness. Not the journey to freedom, probably the journey to forgiveness, but then the freedom of forgiveness. Fred and I have talked at various times about various aspects of forgiveness. He's a clinical psychologist. He calls himself a secular scientist, meaning he doesn't bring spirituality. He doesn't bring 12 steps. He doesn't bring religion. He doesn't bring God into any of his conversations. But he has no problem hooking up with me, who uses all those words, because they're totally compatible. The words are different, but the dynamic and the path is the same. And he is a specialist and has done his doctoral thesis on forgiveness at Stanford. He teaches there. his doctoral dissertation he did about 40 years ago. Then he converted that dissertation into a book called Forgive for Good. He also has another book, Forgive for Love. Different, but certainly describing the same path for different reasons. Forgive for Good is the general path. Forgive for Love is about relationships. Okay, so the 12 steps have a promise. Most of you would respond if I'd asked you the question, oh, awakening, of course, Herb, especially if you've listened to me. 12 steps to awakening, that is step 12. But what does awakening mean? It means freedom from addiction, and it means freedom from unmanageability. But today we're going to talk about the freedom of forgiveness. The freedom to, of course, forgiveness, but the freedom of forgiveness. There's a process in the same way there is for the steps. There's a process. I guess that's kind of like just human development. There's a natural biological and then psychological and then perhaps philosophical and then perhaps even theological, certainly sociological. Yeah, I'm using big words, but it's all meant to describe different phases of the human development to consciousness. I've been very impressed in the recent couple years with that word, consciousness, as the centerpiece of it all. The one thing that makes us human. There's two things, but the one thing that specifically makes us human in the beginning is our consciousness. There isn't another sentient being that we're aware of that has the awareness of consciousness, that they know that they know, that they can self-reflect on their knowing and self-reflect on their not knowing. And of course, correct intelligently. Well, that brings us to the second component of our humanity, and that we can make a decision. But it's in that order. We know something and then we can do something, because if you don't know something, you don't have an option to do something. Now, you may listen to somebody who gives you a description of what to do, and you may not know it, and you may not, in fact, like it, and you may even disagree with it. But if you do what they suggest that you do and they have what you want, you'll get what they have. I hope you're following that. That's the basic code and secret in the rooms of spiritual direction, and more narrowly in the rooms of the 12-step culture. It doesn't matter what you know, and it doesn't matter how you feel. It does matter what you do. And you don't have to like it, and you don't have to know it, and you don't have to believe it, and you can resist all you want as long as you move your feet in that direction. I hope you're really hearing this. It doesn't matter what you know. It doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter how you resist, and it doesn't matter at all about your attitude. I mean, of course it does. It'll make it easier if your attitude's better. But despite your thoughts, despite your feelings, despite your attitude, despite your resistance, if you take the actions, your life will change. This is the process. Open your hearts and open your minds, and I know you want to. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir. Who does this on a Saturday morning for me and sometime evening for you? But no matter where you are, you're here for a couple hours anyway. That's my hope. That's our invitation. So you've already made up your mind and spent some money, perhaps even, to allocate these 2 hours to your personal growth, or at least your personal curiosity. There's a certain openness demonstrated by that. But here I'm asking you to ask the spirit of the universe for intervention. Yep. Please come Bring your crowbar. Open my mind and open my heart. I want to, I'm willing to, I just don't know that I don't know, and I don't see the blindness because of the blindness. Bring the light. God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, the 12 steps, freedom, forgiveness, and you. For an open mind and a new experience with all of that, especially freedom, forgiveness, and you. Yep, you've seen it before if you've been around me for a minute. The Bondage of Herbie in Addiction, February 20th, 1984. When they asked me to stop drinking to support my wife's recovery, that was as simple as it was. And I was willing to hear that and to do that. And I was delivered, struck sober the next day, neutralized. I didn't know that for several months. Ask yourself, are you free of your addiction? But ask yourself a more poignant question. Are you free of unmanageability, the second half of the first step? Or are you experiencing serial suffering? Great term. Serial suffering on that carousel of the merry-go-round, sometimes up, sometimes down, sometimes north, sometimes south, but regular or cyclical or periodic disturbances. You think it can change? Well, it's a trick question because here you are. Of course you do, because here you are. Forgiveness specifically is the focus today. What does it mean, forgiveness? Look it up in a dictionary sometime. Please don't distract yourself with a lot of research or looking at books or looking at papers. Make notes, absolutely, but kind of listen to the flow. I come at you with pretty intense understanding and pretty intense description of my experience. You'd miss it if you tried to do any research while we're doing this. That's up to you, of course. Do I hold them, whatever that means to you, responsible for your current suffering? Nobody's responsible for your current suffering. I think you probably anticipated that from me. Nobody, no thing, no circumstance, nobody is responsible for your current suffering. Doesn't matter what happened a minute ago. It's your reaction that is creating your suffering. Do you continue to blame? So I'm going to jump right into it. Most of you are 12-step people. If you're not, it's okay. My work is open to anybody who wants to have a spiritual awakening. I do suggest that you go through the steps of one of the 12-step programs, most clearly coded and described in the big book, if you have somebody who can help you decode it and translate it into a practical application, because that's what I needed at 5 years sober. Being an active member of AA, calling a sponsor every day, going to a meeting every day. It took me 5 years to find somebody who had the understanding of the big book and able to translate it into language that I could then translate into personal and practical application. Many people are not as slow as I am. It's just my experience. The key, if you heard me, the key there was, of course, that I'm in a 12-step program. The key was that I found somebody who understood the big book and who had an experience with the big book and that had personally applied the the instructions in the big book and had a spiritual awakening. Now, I knew none of that when I met this man. I just knew that I resonated with him at a level I had never resonated with anybody else. 1988. And he helped me do the steps all the way through step 9. Now, in retrospect, I can see that it was the beginning of step 4 and the completion of step 9 that was the forgiveness process. I'm going to repeat that. It was the beginning of step 4 and the completion of step 9 that was the forgiveness process. Process that didn't happen overnight. It took 6 to 9 months because we spent several months on steps 1, 2, and 3. And after I got into the work of step 9, he gave me the instructions on 10, 11, and 12. And it took me 3 to 4 months to complete my 9th step. Meanwhile, I'm practicing 10, 11, and 12 like the big book suggests. Oh, yeah, page 84. We have entered the world of the spirit at the end of the 9th step. We have entered the world of the spirit. We have been placed in a position of neutrality with regard to our addiction at the end of the 9th step, but we're not cured. No comment there about what does he mean by that. My interpretation is, since he's addressed addiction, we are placed in a position of neutrality, first half of the first step. That we're not cured is addressing the second half of the first step, unmanageability. That we're not cured of unmanageability. We have a daily reprieve from our self-centeredness and our self-will. We have a daily reprieve, and we need to use step 10 as a spot check inventory. We'll talk more about it in a little bit. The key tool of emotional sobriety, the key tool of the forgiveness process. To course correct, to stay in alignment with my understanding of the flow of reality. Have I completed? Yes, you can complete your 9th step. Dead people. People who you can't find. People who you shouldn't find. No matter what your history is. More about that. But ask yourself, have I actually completed all of the 8-step map of the harms I had done in my entire life? Not just when I'm using in my addiction, but prior to that and after that. Have I completed my 9th step? And do I practice step 10 on a daily basis? Bill calls it a spot check inventory in the 12 and 12. He quotes there, it's a spiritual axiom. Whenever I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me. Do you believe that? Do you even know that? Do you accept that? If you're disturbed, it's your problem. It's not circumstances, it's not events, and it's nobody is disturbing you. It's huge. It's huge. Do I practice step 10? So those are the questions. Have I finished step 9? Do I practice step 10? These are the preludes to a life of forgiveness and a life of freedom. To experience the promises of step 9, there's many promises in the big book, and you can make a note of this. Step 3 has a paragraph of promises on page 63. Step 5 has a paragraph of promises on page 75. And the ultimate promise is the promise of step 12 itself. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. Have you experienced these promises? Have you experienced freedom? Freedom and neutrality with regard to your addiction. That's the first promise. the minimum promise. But freedom from unmanageability, you competently manage your life right now. You won't hear this much in meetings. You'll hear God, let God manage your life. I understand the spirit of it. It's just wrong from my standpoint. God does not want to manage your life. Not that I know what God wants. And God doesn't want, by the way. There's no movement in whatever that reality is. It doesn't come and go. It doesn't reward and punish. It's not negative or positive. It just is. At least that's my belief about it. Finish step 9. Practice step 10. The promise of forgiveness. And when you look it up, when I looked it up, it says to release or to be released. To release or to be released. The two dynamics. I release them, and as the St. Francis prayer said, I'm released. I release them, and as the Lord's Prayer said, I'll be released from my debt. Freedom of forgiveness. Reflect for just a minute. Where is my life not working? How effective have my efforts been? Do you really want freedom? Do you even know what freedom actually means and feels like and experiences? Freedom, real freedom, the freedom of joy, the freedom of contentment, the freedom of alignment, the freedom that allows your life to flourish. These are words I use and have for 35 years, not without suffering. Of course, life is in session. We're not free of the vicissitudes of life. We're not free of the speed bumps of life. But this process gives us the shock absorbers to handle the speed bumps. What does forgiveness mean? We're going to answer that. Today, what is my invitation? What is my invitation today? I love that phrase. What is my invitation? I use it at the end of each of my morning meditations. For the day, what is my invitation today? What is the universe, the spirit, the voice inside, the inclination, the inspiration, the intuition, choose your words, inviting me to think, especially, and to do, translating everything into the actions for the day? Bill asks us in the step 11, think about the 24 hours ahead, consider your plans for the day. If you have any doubt about how to do meditation from the Big Book, step 11, go to my YouTube channel. I have lots of recordings on meditation, but specifically step 11, a meditation practice. This 12-step process has delivered me to freedom. I did not know that. I didn't know it was available. I didn't know what to expect because I didn't know that I couldn't know. I didn't know because I didn't know. And I couldn't see that I didn't see. You've heard me say those things. They're not, they're just meant to try to describe a process of waking up. Establishing or reestablishing, or at least making healthy my relationship with life. I use the term here, power, those first 3 steps. But with life itself, then with myself, and then with others. This is the process of awakening. This is the process of regeneration. This is the process of transformation. This is the process to freedom from addiction. No, page 84. If you have any doubt, make a note. Bill uses the term in one of his recordings. He was delivered. In the Big Book, it says we are placed in a position of neutrality. Hear the movement. We are placed. It's almost a passive experience, but it follows a very active process. But we can't stay there. We can get there, but we can't stay there. We have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. What does that mean? Our relationship, spiritual condition, our relationship with power, our relationship with the light, our relationship with God as I don't understand it. Hear that, please. It's a takeoff from the words in the big book that I believe is more accurate, at least for myself. God as I don't understand it. I'm very comfortable with living in the mystery, our way of living. Bill asks us to think about a metaphor on page 47 in the big book. He says, we walk through a spiritual arch to a new freedom. We walk through a spiritual arch to a new freedom. And step two, that willingness that I talked about earlier, is the cornerstone. Not just willingness to believe, but willingness to take direction that we might not believe in and may not want to do. Willingness. The central point in my recovery. And Bill says the cornerstone on the arch, that first stone placed on the foundation. He doesn't use the word surrender in the big book. It's not there. But I do. To capture the experience of complete defeat. I surrender, I implode, consciously or unconsciously. I give up. And then I'm willing to take directions that I don't believe in. And I end up with step three, where there's a commitment to action. Bill says it's a decision to turn. In step two, he uses the word choice on page 53. God is or God isn't. What is your choice? But on page 55, with this attitude, you cannot fail. Think honestly, search fearlessly, search diligently deep inside. And then on page 63, make a decision to turn. Decision perhaps connoting action, whereas choice, there's no action. Choice for step two doesn't require an action. It requires an act of faith. That choice, God is. And to live then your life as if it's true. Trust. The hope and trust of step three. The decision to turn by a commitment to take the actions of steps 4 through 9, the forgiveness process that leads us to a way of life and a way of living. Bill uses both terms. I refer to a way of life as the noun, the definition of the formula 10, 11, and 12, and the implementation of the formula into action, our way of living. 10 and 11 and 12, the best kept secrets in the room. Why is there so much relapse? Many, 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 many reasons. I think one of the key reasons is people do not understand the information I just revealed. The first 9 steps will get you there, but that won't keep you there. Daily reprieve, I wonder if Bill meant daily. Daily practice of 10 when I'm disturbed. Daily practice of 11 when I want guidance, which is daily. Daily practice of principles in step 12 with a chronic 24-hour, 7-day-a-week attitude of how can I help? Not in the program. How can I help in the universe, in the community of humanity? At least that's my broad, all-inclusive understanding of the application of a spiritual program, not just the 12 steps for addiction, but a way of life. That is the turning from our self-centeredness, the spiritual malady, page 62. And we can't even reduce it much by wishing or trying on our own power. I'm quoting. Bill nails unmanageability at the end of the second paragraph on page 62. And he says, we're as powerless over our manageability as we are over our addiction. He doesn't say it in those clear words, but he implies it. We can't even reduce it much by wishing or trying on our own power. We need God. For freedom. Again, that word, freedom. He defines spiritual awakening in Appendix 2. If you haven't read it or read it recently, do that. Just a page and a half, and it tells you what is a spiritual experience, what is a spiritual awakening, how they're the same and how they're different, and basically, both of them produce a change. A change in the way we think and feel and behave, and fortunately, it's done to us as a gift of grace, but not without us, with the action in our willingness. Willingness without action is fantasy, this man said to me. Yeah, that's the kind of guy, hard rock, black and white. Willingness without action is fantasy. I'm in the bondage of addiction until I'm not. Then I'm in the bondage of unmanageability until I'm not. I want to be free. But even finishing the first 9 steps, all I see is that there are no walls and no ceiling and no floor, but I'm still looking through the prison bars of some victimhood until I begin practicing 10, 11, and 12 and get free in the sense of emotional sobriety. That was Bill's experience. He started talking about emotional sobriety at 20 years sobriety. Wrote his article in his letter in 1956, which he turned into an article in the Grapevine in 1958. He called it the next frontier. It didn't happen. A man, I forget his name now, wrote some books, Stage 2 Recovery, in the 80s, following up on emotional sobriety in his own terminology. It didn't catch on then. Fortunately, right around the year 2000, it began to blossom, a renaissance in the 12-step rooms where we are talking about emotional sobriety and the emphasis on steps 10, 11, and 12. Emotional sobriety, self-regulation. Coming into and through steps 8 and 9, and then realizing this is a daily reprieve and a daily effort because we're as powerless over our manageability as we are over our addiction. I need to be in partnership. If you hear any one word, and I'll say that often about different words, so just make a note of the long list of words to remember. Willingness, of course, was one of the key words. Action certainly is one of the key words. But daily is one of the key words. In 8, we name the harms. What is a harm? Misunderstood. I ask people all the time, what's the harm? And they tell me about their behavior. Well, that's not the harm. What you did is not the harm. The impact of what you did is the harm that you make amends for, so that you change that behavior so that you don't create that negative impact and you attempt to repair the damage of your history. Now, of course, we can't undo the history, but we can address it in some fashion. We make that list. This is the forgiveness list. You're going to release them from their harm, from their hurt. And paradoxically, you are released from the guilt and the shame and the negativity and the potentially the lack of relationship. Willingness is the key to step 6. Willingness is the key to step 8. Willingness. All of the even steps are naming steps. Willingness. All of the odd steps are action, decision steps. Make a decision to take action. Willingness to make the decision. Willingness to make it, that decision practical by putting it into action, moving your feet. You know you're in action when your feet are moving, not when your head is thinking and not when your heart is feeling and not when your imagination or memory are working. No, productive perhaps, or fantasy perhaps. The only time that you're in action is when your feet are moving. Who did I diminish? That's the word I use for harm. Diminish the quality of their life. What did I do? Looking at my behavior is important, but the impact of my behavior is the only issue here. How did they receive it? How did it reduce the quality of their life? And then how do I take care of that? Perhaps merely addressing it and naming it and acknowledging it. I had many people say, thank you for acknowledging it, because they got the truth rather than the gaslighting that I had been so used to. Am I willing to repair the damage? That's really the key here. The 8-step is a roadmap. It tells you what you need to do and when you've done it. I use 3x5 cards. The whole process of the 8-step has been recorded on my YouTube channel, as well as the 9-step specific of the particular amends. And there are several, and there are some quite dramatic, especially the healing and the repair of the relationship with my wife. At 1988, I was able to, with 5 years of sobriety, ask her to pray with me because the damage was incalculable and irreparable. And therapy had not worked on me, and marriage counseling had not worked on us. And she agreed to pray with me. A special process that is outlined in the recordings in the YouTube channel. And when she died 6 years ago, we had 52 years of marriage, the last 35 of which were a true friendship. How does that happen? How does that healing take place? Willingness and action and forgiveness. Making direct amends. People who I couldn't find. People who I shouldn't find. I created a prayer practice. This is a spiritual practice. I didn't do it on my own. I did it in connection and conversation with a sponsor and step guide and a spiritual director, several people, and a therapist sometimes, to make sure that I wasn't going to create more harm with my actions. Sometimes with an accountant, sometimes with an attorney, just to make sure that there are guidelines of common sense. I don't go willy-nilly out there to harm myself, but I'm willing to, given the necessity as described by people who have experience before me. How do you make amends to dead people? Pretty simple. Go to a gravesite. It doesn't need to be theirs, but it's a symbolic ritual that gave me freedom from my rage for my father. Again, go to the YouTube channels for specifics on that. Describe the harm. I went to the gravesite of somebody in a local cemetery. It wasn't my father. It wasn't a relative. It was the local cemetery. And I wrote the letter there describing the harm. And then I read it out loud and asked, is there anything else that you want me to address? And I suggested the amends. And when I asked the question, here I am all alone in a cemetery, having this conversation out loud, read the letter out loud, had the conversation out loud, as if this spirit is there, and whew, powerful, emotional, bring Kleenex. And I heard it very clearly. Take care of your mother. A story for a different day. The rest of the story, to quote Paul Harvey, is on my YouTube channel. Powerful, powerful. Got free of my father, and the difficulty we had had all our life. And that led me to get free of my cranky relationship with my mother, because I followed up with an amends to her that I was asked to do in my amends to my father, releasing them, and I got released. Forgiveness is a process. I'm hoping you're hearing it. I was 5 years sober, and it took a year to do the steps. 3 years later, I did the steps again, a broader and deeper relationship with myself, a broader and deeper relationship with some amends that I had not made. More will be revealed because there's more light. 3 years later, I did the steps again. And for the very first time, I was introduced to the set aside prayer. So all that prior work of 10 years was set aside. I didn't know it at the time, but I prayed that it happened. And when I finished the work 2 years later, 2 years in doing the third journey through the steps, I had a experience of unmanageability. For the very first time, I knew what it meant. Page 52 and pages 60 to 62, if you have any doubt, make a note. Don't be researching it right now. Please just pay attention to what's going on right here. And then I entered into chapter 4 with a whole new openness and attitude. Because of my experience with unmanageability, I knew I needed God in a different way, and I needed a different God. Yeah, I needed a bigger God. And for the very first time at age 56 and 10 years sober, I had a personal relationship with the God of my not understanding for the very first time. A vital and vibrant personal relationship through steps 2 and step 3. For the very first time, having that experience and going through the steps. Prior to that, going through them basically unconscious. This is the process forgiveness, a decision to release them, which comes through the step 8 and 9 process. And the paradox is, although forgiveness is a process, the freedom actually is me, self-forgiveness. I am released. Forgiveness is not, look at the charts here on the PowerPoint, not to condone, not to forget, not to tolerate, ignore, approve, excuse, or minimize, not to pardon or deny or absolve or reconcile, or certainly not to invite them to hurt us again, and not even, especially, to surrender justice. One of the men I worked with sent his father, whom he loved and had forgiven 100%. He sent his father to prison at age 67 for 6 years because what his father had done, he wanted to signal to his own daughters, was not okay, and that there are consequences to behavior. He loves his father, he forgave his father, but he didn't surrender the justice that was due to his daughters. More of that story again in the YouTube. This isn't about retaliation or exacting revenge or seeking compensation or judging. Forgiveness is none of those things. It's really clean. It's a decision to release them. If you have any doubt about resentments and getting free of resentments, read 66 and 67 in the big book. It doesn't say to pray for them. Please. It's a wonderful spiritual practice. I understand the spirit of it. I know there are stories in the back of the book that talk about praying for them. Wonderful, wonderful. I have no problem with that at all, but it's not the instruction in the big book. in the actual instructions of the steps application. Page 66 and 67 says we pray for ourselves. We pray for our healing. We pray for the removal of the cancer in us so that it doesn't metastasize and choke out the spirit in us. We pray for spiritual intervention. We pray for the divine therapist, the divine surgeon, to remove from us this cancer of resentment. And I did that. I had 8 deep resentments. I prayed 8 prayers every day. Prayer doesn't change God. Get really clear on that. At least this is my interpretation. Prayer changes the prayer. And I prayed that these deep 8 resentments be removed. And after 3 months of daily prayer, please hear the consistency, 3 months of daily prayer, one of them was removed. And I knew it because I didn't have any negative valence. And then 7, and then 6, and they melted away like snow in June over time. And here's the really good news about freedom. None of them ever returned, not even a hint of mint. Gone. I have other irritations and disturbances, perhaps of very minor, nothing gross anymore. There's more light in my life and therefore less darkness. The process of step 9 is acknowledging the harm done to others so they are released, and your experience is you will be released. The process of step 4 is to do the 3rd column of the resentment inventory and get very clear on your delusional beliefs, your unenforceable rules, the script that you have that is killing you and everybody around you. And you don't know that you don't know that you have a script and you're living out of your script. And the 4th column identifies our motives. And we see, if we're honest with ourselves, the corrupt motives when we ask those 5 questions illustrated on page 67 in the big book. Those 5 questions about the self-centeredness and the manifestation of self-centeredness. And I see that my motive is all about me. And I can't make a decision other than me unless I have partnership with power. I'm hardwired to be self-centered, unmanageability. But I can be rewired in step 3. I can be rewired in step 5. I can be rewired through the balance of step 9. I can be rewired with the consistent application of 10, 11, and 12 to turn to a relationship with God, to turn to have healthy relationships with myself, to turn to have healthy relationships with others. And when any darkness is manifest and I'm aware of it, I can handle it through step 10. The turning to be in alignment. The word alignment's not in step 3. In fact, the word alignment's not in the big book. But it's my word for step 3, and it's my word for the process of steps 4 through 9. The total process of step 4 through 9 is the turning from my self-centeredness to other-centeredness. Other with a capital O, step 11. Other with a small o, step 12. The total point of the process is like a spiritual coin having 2 sides. I'm a whole and integrated person as a coin, a human being seeking a spiritual experience and a spiritual being seeking a human experience, when in fact I'm in other-centeredness. Not that I'm giving up my relationship with myself, but I'm finding a true relationship with my true self when I'm in relationship with God and when I'm in a healthy relationship with others. That's a lot. That was very dense. That summarized the outcome of years and years and years of understanding and practice and application of the step process. Fred Luskin summarizes it in his book, Forgive for Good. This is his process as I've distilled it, paralleling the process of steps 4 through 9, different vocabulary, a different approach for a different reason, but the same outcome. Because we're human beings who want to be better human beings. We're human beings who want to be free of the darkness. First, we name it, he says. What are we naming? Our hurt. You can't not do a fourth step. I don't care how you do it, autobiographically or according to the big book, without naming all the betrayals, all of the hurt, all of the trauma, and progressively doing it better over time because there's more light. Each time there's more light, each time there's more light and less darkness. And to understand it progressively, I think that's part of what I've actually revealed today. You could hear the progression of getting sober in 1984, becoming awake in 1988, and then continuing to become more awake through 1996, and then to sustain that awakening through a daily practice of 10, 11, and 12 since then. A process like the dimmer switch, going up a notch at a time. An infinite dimmer switch because we're in relationship with infinite light. And there's no end to this. Using the metaphors that I'm using. To understand it gives you hope that in fact you can be released. But you have to know what the unenforceable rules are. Column 3, my beliefs. I was shocked and embarrassed with the delusion of the beliefs I had about myself, let alone about other people. Unenforceable rules, that's a term phrased by Dr. Luskin. The script that we have that we do not have, that is just a lie, a myth of our creation, of what we want and what we would like, Disneyland style. And to acknowledge that my attitude needs to change, column 4. My motives. It's not all about me. I am the center of my life. I'm just not the center of life. And reality is not personal. Reality is just reality. And I need to take actions and take responsibility for my actions and know that there are consequences. And to course correct if I'm not getting the outcome for my actions and my decisions that I want. The most important ingredient in all of everything I've said in my journey is having a sponsor and a step guide. Hopefully they're the same person, but if they're not, like in my case, they were two different people. A sponsor as a sounding board and a step guide as a Sherpa, meaning how to guide me on the map up the mountain to navigate the obstacles and to get to the top meaning freedom. A process. They are released when I complete my 9th step. Well, at least I've done the part that I can. You cannot change history and you cannot change them, but you can do the best you can, and it's good enough. Please hear that. You can do the best you can, and it's good enough. Even though you don't think it's good enough for the moment. And we are released. Bondage of addiction, that brings us here. Bondage of unmanageability keeps us here. Freedom is the promise, but freedom from the bondage of self. This came to me in meditation. A forgiving person has no past. An unforgiving person has no future because the darkness is like a blanket that suffocates the spirit. That 10th step. I'm going to wind it up here in about 5 minutes if Dr. Luskin's on the phone. This is step 10, a very quick journey, and you can see a longer version and a deeper, broader explanation in the YouTube channels. We enter the world of the spirit, Bill says. Physical recovery, placed in a position of neutrality. He uses the term recovered in the second title page of the book. If you have any doubt about any of the words I just used, please go to the YouTube channel. Not cured is the key. Daily reprieve is the invitation. Do you have a sense of well-being and contentment today with whatever it is you've done today? How is it for you? What's the quality of your life? Bill suggests that 10, 11, and 12 are the way of living. I'm not going to address 11 and 12 in any other than the references I've made, but I'm going to give a little deeper explanation of step 10 because it's I believe, the tool of emotional sobriety and one of the primary tools of daily forgiveness, that is, releasing them and being released from our disturbance. Bill says it in the 12 and 12. Step 10. It's a spiritual axiom. Whenever we're disturbed, there's something wrong with me. We stay awake by continuing to take personal inventory. When wrong, promptly admitting it. When wrong, when disturbed, promptly checking it out. Bill calls it a spot check inventory. We don't do it at night. We don't do it in writing. At least these are my interpretations. It's a tool to be used during the day when you're disturbed by your resentments and fear and dishonesty and selfishness, all the things that you identified with in step 4 and eliminated through step 9. But you can take the action when in fact they recur, because Bill says, watch for them when they pop up, when they pop up, not if they pop up. We pray and we discuss and we make an amend and we turn our thoughts to helping somebody else. And the results are, look at that. Forgiveness, the opposite of resentment. Trust, the opposite of fear. Honesty, the opposite of dishonesty. And then thinking, oh, I don't know what's going on here with my little, there we go. And being helpful. See, I don't use the term service any longer. I dropped it a long time ago. Too sophisticated, the wee small voice said. Use the word helpful. How can you help? How can you be helpful? Wherever you are, not just in the program, not just in the meetings, not just in 12 step, in the world, in the community of humanity, where the glasses, the lenses through which you look, how can I be helpful? And Bill says, I'm not sure what's going on here with my, sanity. That's the promise of step 3, that we will be invulnerable to the obsession, not that we will be cured of psychiatric or psychological problems. That's a story for professionals, please. This is to deal with addiction. And we have a spiritual shield. This is my terminology, a spiritual shield, as long as we have a effective relationship with power, effective relationship with the light. But we're not cured. Just like we plug in our cell phone on a daily basis so that it receives the charge so it'll be useful the next day. We stay plugged into the power of the universe so that we'll be useful at all times. The lights will be on, a process. That dimmer switch goes up a notch at a time, like I just described. In my case, it took 12 to 15 years for the lights to get really bright and the darkness to get really eliminated. But I know from watching other people that darkness can descend on us. The dimmer switch can go down a notch at a time. And I've seen the relapse. And it's 80%, minimum 80% relapse. Why is that? Because people don't really either understand or accept or experience or commit to this process of freedom. A forgiveness for freedom, a change in our attitude, a change in our acceptance, a change in our actions. My feet determine my freedom, my attitude, and my actions. Forgiveness, my decision to release, and my desire to be released. How free do you want to be? You've heard me ask it before. It's a question that I hope reverberates with us on a daily basis. How free do I want to be? And how soon? Freedom. Freedom from addiction, but freedom from unmanageability, freedom from the darkness, freedom to live in the light, the freedom of joy. Read chapter 12 from the 12 and 12. One of the key phrases that struck me this time reading it this year is the joy of living. The joy of living. Bill uses the term, keep your head in the clouds, step 11, and your feet on the ground, step 12. Again, you can go to the YouTube channels and hear or watch recordings on both step 11 and step 12, and or even the entire panoramic view of the joy of living, if you're so inclined. I will come back to the prayer when we finish up here. All right, kids, we're here, and I'm here as long as you want to be here and you have questions and or comments or experiences. Fred and I have done a lot of talking. You've done a lot of listening. If you have questions or you have comments or you have experiences or anything that you would like to say, the forum is open. You raise your hand through the reaction icon. You are being recorded. We will continue to do that. And if you don't want to be recorded, probably don't talk. Maybe we'll have a point where we are not recording and then you could come on. I'll see. I'm just made that up and see how we go. But right now we're going to talk to Charlotte, please.
Hi, Herb. Grateful to be here. I am dealing with I'm going to move this so y'all don't see my fan turning there, but I am dealing with a situation. My dad died 2 months ago, and soon after he died, my neighbor manipulated a large sum of money from me, and I am practicing. I love what Fred said, practice. But my question is, when I walk outside and see my neighbor, because I can't get away with it, what would you suggest I do? I've been practicing the serenity prayer, but what came up today is it doesn't feel personal enough and it doesn't seem to be working. What can I do when I see my neighbor, this person that reminds me of this pain and what happened?
Well, I'm not going to ask too many questions to get into the story, but right on the surface of it, I'm assuming that if you care to, you get an attorney involved.
I gave the money. My house was flooded, and he was going to work on my house. I gave the money in cash without a receipt. So I don't think.
So you don't have any evidence of that.
No.
Okay, so then you have to take a look at, okay, I was naive,
Mhm.
I was uninformed, I was inexperienced, I made a mistake. It's over now. So again, I'll reference to the resentment section in the big book, column 3, column 4. You may or may not have done the work the way I like to do it, very expansive, very deep, but there's a prayer practice in there for the removal of the resentment in you. It sounds to me like, and I watched your response to my words, that you have taken responsibility, that you were naive and irresponsible, inexperienced. And it's kind of like, oh, yeah, I was taken advantage of. Yes. All right. So when you own that and you don't feel there's any recourse in terms of criminal action or anything along that line, then you pray to be released from it. That's what we're exactly talking about. And try that specifically. I want to have this pain of victimhood, this anger that I have, even the blame and the guilt that I have about being irresponsible and inexperienced. I want it removed. And then talk about it, of course, to your sponsor, not generally other people, because what we resist and talk about kind of persists and grows. So talk about it to one or two people that you really trust, where you can be vulnerable. But your goal is to be released from it. You can't do that. We have the good fortune, in contrast to Fred. Fred is stuck with his own willpower. We are blessed with the concept of God as a power other than ourselves. And that's what we're asking for. We're asking for help here. Does that work?
Yes. Yes, I desperately want to be free. I know in your workshops, how free do you want to be? Because I am so unmanageable, and I think it's wrapped up in talk about vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've lost you.
No, you're breaking up a little bit.
Okay, I'm sorry, but thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Charlotte, very much. And there's a solution. Believe me, this spiritual path is real. It's not fantasy, it's not Disneyland, it's not poetry. It's rock solid from my standpoint and my 40 years of experience now. Ruthie, please.
Hi, Herb. Thank you so much. I'll take my camera off if I can't be heard. But so I was interested in coming on today because I have a situation where the injury is ongoing, right? And so somehow, oh, that's different from something that happened yesterday, but that the circumstance is part of my reality, even if it's an ongoing thing. And I'm taking all the legal actions, whatever I can take. But I think the invitation is to take responsibility for the feelings that I have on a daily basis. And I really, from what I could hear, the exercise of practicing. I love a person, including myself, who has practiced victimization as a practice was really helpful. That framework is like, gulp, oh, wow, that's what I do. And then to 15 seconds at a time, practice freedom. And I can see the value of, because gratitude sometimes, do a gratitude list. I'm like, oh, BS, screw you. But that really, if I just do genuinely, wow, I have an orange. Wow, I'm not in Ukraine, or, I'm not in these war-torn countries for 15, like even 10 seconds or 5 seconds. That's I've carved out some freedom in my victimization practice.
That's why I like his term skillful. We're practicing a skill, and we can do it 15 seconds and practice that positivity and use new words. We become brain dead or even aversive to the word gratitude because not again.
Yeah, right. Because my only solution and my prayer has been, God, please eliminate this person from the planet. Like, to me, right. And one other thing that I've learned from my work with you, and whatever the prayer is, please, God, take away my difficulties, that victory over them. I used to think it was that, eliminate the problem. But my difficulties are my thinking. Like, God, please take away
your feelings and your thinking, your reaction.
Yeah, whether it's my character defects, whatever that's like, again, the difficulties are not the person or the situation. The difficulty is whatever's happening here.
No, that's exactly it. Or here in my heart. And he gave us for me, he gave us a new question. I hadn't heard this before. What do I want to experience?
Right.
Oh, yeah. What do I want to experience? Regret, suffering, guilt, shame, nasty? No, I don't want to experience it. What do I want to? I want to experience freedom. I want to experience joy. Okay, so for 15 seconds, I'm going to envision what does that feel like? I'm going to practice a skill opposite. What experience am I looking for? I love that question.
And also the practicality of, okay, I love knitting, go knit. I love cooking, go cook. Like if you want
Yeah.
to tap into the feeling, take an action that you already, dancing, dance to a one
Well,
song,
so
even
no,
if
the
it's just for
key,
those seconds.
I want to emphasize what you're saying, though. The
Yes,
key is action,
right,
not thinking, not feeling, but
right,
doing something. Actually, literally moving feet and hands in some direction that you chose.
right.
Action. I mean, it's magical, but it's probably biological, physiological, and psychological. And we're stimulating some neuronal synapse release but we don't have to go there. We just know if we move our feet in a contrary direction, we will feel contrary. We will feel different.
Yeah, and ultimately it's acceptance, because even after I feel great, I still have the problem,
Well,
but I
and
haven't made it worse
see,
with the feeling.
and the point that you're really making underneath what I at least what I heard was also we can't use activity because that itself can become an addiction.
Oh, that's me too.
Let's
Yeah,
go to the gym and work out for 4 hours. And yeah, no, that's
right,
not the solution. Yeah, all
right.
right.
It's the balance between the situation is and I don't feel horrible.
And the key word is balance. And that's why I need sponsorship because I actually really don't know what balance is.
Right. Thank you, Herb.
Thank you, Ruthie. Colleen, please.
Hi, Herb. I'm in your AWOL and I found out about this today from your AWOL, so I decided to join and it's been really helpful. And one of the things while we were talking, something became insightful to me. And I was sick a few years ago and I was critically ill. I had sepsis and kidney stone and failure. And I was in the hospital going in for surgery. I called my relatives, my aunt that's alive, and I just said I wanted to let her know what was happening. Well, what ensued was her talking to her daughter, who's crazy and an addict and a gossip, and she told.
Okay, we need to get to the
Yeah.
bottom line
All
here,
right,
rather
anyway.
than the story, please.
All right. So anyway, so we've had a resentment, we've had a falling out. I blocked her because she was toxic, nasty to me. And what I realized when I was listening today was, I have this resentment. I want to work on it, get rid of it. But I wrote down, why was I hurt by her? And it was, I had no one with me while I was sick and I needed love, not gossip.
Yeah.
I feel like that's my heart.
There you go. Yeah. But so bottom line, so tell me what your conclusion is from what you just said.
Well, it was my perception that
And
was
your need.
right.
Yeah.
And I have to see her in a few weeks.
Yeah.
And so that helps me
Yeah.
take care of my part.
Yeah. Your responsibility was your reaction to it because you had a need that wasn't being fulfilled. It wasn't her job to fill it, but you gave her the job and she didn't take it.
Right.
Thank
Nobody.
you so much.
All right, thank you.
Colleen. No, that's great. Wonderful example.
Thank you.
Yeah. Phoebe, please.
Hello. I had an experience, and that was what I was going to share when I went through this. It's late at night here in Norway, and I'm in my bed, and I'm very tired. So I hope I make sense.
Did you say you're in Norway?
Yes.
Wow. Well, thank you for your effort.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question, but then I kind of got the answer. I just started writing during the meeting, and I was just going to share what came up. It was about, first of all, I was going to ask, what do you do with resentments about yourself?
Yes,
Because
good.
one of the most deepest resentments I have is about something very unfair which happened in society, and what that other dude who is called Fred, helped me with was to accept that it was wrong. I can't. He gave me permission to say it was wrong, and I
Yes.
think all this time I've been thinking that life should be right, and that is why I've been so mad. But it was wrong, and that made me think, oh,
And
I felt better about that.
another word that might help you is, and somebody else said it this way, is, oh, that's unfortunate.
I like wrong. Yeah. Yeah.
You stay
And-
with it, girl.
yeah. Anyway, so my resentment was something towards myself, and it's so, so deep, and I'm just doing a step for at the moment about it. And I'm thinking, okay, how do I explain this? I can say what the resentment is. I'll just have to be really vulnerable. I was suffering from depression, and I left my little girl in a flat for a little while because I couldn't handle it. And in that moment, I felt I'd let her down as a mom, and I haven't been able to let go of this.
Mhm.
And then I realized there is the harm done, which is she was okay. She was a little girl in a cot. I knew she was safe. And then what I really resent myself for is the shame I feel. If that makes any sense. So there's that. I can't really resent myself for feeling shame. And then this is the horrible crux of the matter is I'm also resenting myself. How could I possibly treat another human being this way? And then I go dramatic in my head. How can I do this? And then I have this horrible feeling of, oh my God, I'm human. Do you know what? I'm just like all the other bad people in the world. And I don't know. And then I thought, well, why? And I thought I have this belief that I need to pretend to be pure and good to withhold my victim status. Does that make any sense to you? And it was horrible. It makes me feel sick.
Well, but you're seeing the truth of the lie that you've been telling yourself. Exactly.
I don't want to be human.
You're just a human being, and we make mistakes. We're not mistakes. We make mistakes. And the good news is when you're conscious, you can correct the mistakes. Now, part of this process, how old is your daughter today?
She was like below 1 then, and now she's 13.
All right. So could you sit down and have a discussion with her about that? Yeah, how wonderful would that be? What a great bonding experience that would be from her standpoint. Oh my God, my mother's so human.
I think she'd probably be quite aversive to it. She's very teenage, and she'd go, whatever.
Don't judge her and don't prejudge her. My suspicion is and don't have expectations about it, but just be. Fred mentioned the word. Be vulnerable with your daughter and say, I just felt horrible about this, and there was nothing bad, but I just wanted to share with you that, or however your words would be, I just treasure you and I love you, and I hope I'm as good a mother as you need. How's that?
How can I release the feeling of self-hatred and shame that I wasn't good enough?
Well, I think I just gave you an example of
You did?
taking some action, and let's see what happens.
All right then. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome for your vulnerability. Yeah, and try the action. All right. And get some sleep. Thanks, baby. Alice, please.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you so much for the workshop. I really appreciate going deeper on this. I've heard this similar subject before, and your experience and Dr. Laskin was awesome. I wish I could hear a little bit better.
Yeah.
So I have a specific question, and I think Dr. Laskin started talking about some conscious suppression.
Conscious
And-
suppression. Okay.
Or conscious suppression. So what happens to me, I work the steps. It's not perfect as you described, but I do meditation in the morning. I write, for what God's leading me to do, what's the will for today. course, it's longer than it's ever possible to do. And yeah, so I'm a workaholic, probably. Not probably, I am. So by noon, I forget about everything because I'm already overwhelmed. And when God shows me, oh yeah, I have this feeling, this I can't, it's just too much. Everything is too much, so I shut down.
Okay, so what's your question?
So I guess, how do I slow myself down to tend to when I do have those
Are
feelings,
you
and
talking
I don't want
about
to process them, I feel like, the world's not perfect. My special needs daughter doctor didn't do that, my doctor didn't do that, and my list
you
goes
want
on
an
like this.
answer to your question?
Yes, please.
Then you have to stop talking. You ask a question, then you begin giving me St. Paul's sermon.
Okay.
All
Sorry.
right. No, I'm just bringing it to your attention because what you do any one place, you probably do every place. All right. So, is the question that you have about where you're at work or in a work mode, or is this personal at home?
It's personal and both, because I'm a caregiver for my daughter. So I work at home. Okay. For my daughter.
When you say you work for your daughter, you're not getting paid for this. This is your parental responsibility to
No,
take care of
I
a
do get paid
disabled
too.
dog.
It's both. I get paid too. It's both.
Okay. So either whether it's personal or whether it's professional, the answer is, for me anyway, is I make a list of the things that I want to do in the day. After my meditation, I ask what's my invitation, and I make a list. And I check it over in the sense of priorities. I literally number the activities in their priority. And perhaps even midday, I check to see how I'm doing with that because it's a roadmap for me. And then by the end of the day, I have some of the priorities done, but there's maybe some things that are left. They'll goes on the list for tomorrow. Now, this is very practical and very common sense, but you may or may not be doing that because it sounded like you were overwhelmed with a whole head full of things. And my sense is I need it in writing.
I do write it down.
You said again.
I do write it down.
Oh, so tell me then what the struggle is that you don't get it all done.
One is I don't get it all done. I don't prioritize it.
That's the key there, right there, that you don't
Yeah.
prioritize it because you will get done your priority list. And then you have to accept that you can't, you won't get it all done. I mean, you can accept that, or you can work till midnight every night, but you don't want to do
I've done this. I've done this.
Well, of course you have, but is that what you want to do? Well, then you figure out how much time you want to work, and then you self-regulate. Yeah. And maybe even set a timer so that you have an external reminder. And with phones today, we have wonderful technology that can support us. But it's
I have many timers, but not for me.
Yeah. So I don't want to be glib about it. I don't have the problem of workaholism in any out of control sense, but those are the techniques I use. There might be an advantage for you to visit a 12-step program that is actually dealing with it. I'm confident there are some.
Yeah.
So that you're getting literal experience from people who have a similar energy as yours.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Herb.
Thanks, Alice. Wonderful. But there are solutions. That's the total point of all of this. But consciousness and action, consciousness and awareness of that I have a problem and that there are solutions, and then the action to literally find and experiment with. Practice a skill, acquisition of a skill. I love what Dr. Luskin said. Thank you. Maureen, please.
Thank you, Herb. I really appreciated Dr. Luskin's explanation of vulnerability. Like
Yeah.
the radius within our own brain is larger than the circumference of the earth in terms of our ego. I think it's maybe our ego's ability to create that vulnerability for us. But the question I wanted to ask him, and I thought I didn't get a chance to, but maybe you have some insight on this, is like to me, there's a distinction between vulnerabilities that we have, and I understand within the framework of the 12 steps, there's solutions for that. But I'm very curious about the difference between vulnerabilities and when human beings are impacted by trauma, and the trauma that happens to us oftentimes, such as rape or molestation, etc. How can we apply those same principles to those issues of trauma? And I'm assuming, there's an element of a therapeutic process, but I wonder, how does that interplay with what we're doing in 12-step recovery?
Well, 12-step recovery is not a panacea. If you have a broken leg, you don't go to a priest. You go to an orthopedic surgeon. If you have the trauma, as you're describing it, that is a psychological, emotional, kind of real, life-changing kind of thing, you probably do need to go to a skilled therapist to deal with that. I have dealt with skilled therapists. I have dealt with skilled spiritual directors. I have dealt with self-help people, etc. All wonderful. I've never found anything better than the 12-step process to prepare me to deal effectively with other resources. So it's hand in glove. It's a great question. 12-step process will assist you in dealing with trauma, but at some level, professional skill and intervention will be necessary. And there's so much information and so many resources today, specialty in different kinds of trauma, that it's worthy of doing the research that is necessary and asking for referrals from credible people, not just the local people in your meetings. God bless them. Everybody has an opinion. But my go-to position for most everything, either physical or psychological, are the research hospitals in your area. The research hospitals seem to be on the cutting edge of most human problems. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Maureen, thank you so much. Well, wonderful, everybody, and I hope that you were able to understand Fred, to listen to him carefully as I did. Although there was some challenges in the sound, we'll let you know about the recording when we know about it. Now I'm going to invite you to pray. And this is, of course, is an adaptation of the 7-step prayer. I make it more current, I make it more relevant by my standards to what we're doing here, my Creator. See, I need to be recreated. I'm asking for healing here. I was created and I had some experiences. Now I need to be healed. I'm willing to do my part, but I know that I'm as powerless to bring healing to myself as I am to deal effectively with my addiction, my Creator. I am now willing that you should have all of me, healthy and unhealthy. I pray that you now remove from me all inclinations and behaviors that stand in the way of my usefulness to you and my helpfulness to others. Grant me knowledge and wisdom, strength and power, courage and humility as I go out from here intending to do your will by trying to be in alignment with reality as it really is. Amen. This is a prayer for emotional sobriety. I believe. I want to be in alignment with reality. I want to be aware of it. And then to take those corrective actions. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Herb.
Thanks,
Thank you, Herb.
everybody that has supported this call. And
Thank you.